Question 22. Editorialist. News media rarely cover local politics thoroughly, and local political business is usually conducted secretively. These factors each tend to isolate local politicians from their electorates. This has the effect of reducing the chance that any particular act of resident participation will elicit a positive official response, which in turn discourages resident participation in local politics. So, first step, argument or facts. Clearly, we have a set of facts here. And if you notice, the passage is structured as follows. First, we have these two factors: the news media's poor coverage, and second, the fact that local political business is conducted secretively. These two factors lead to isolating local politicians from their electorates. This has the effect of reducing the chance that any particular act of resident participation will elicit a positive official response, which in turn discourages resident participation in local politics. All right, so now that we have that clear, we move to the question stem. Which of the following most strongly supported by the editorialist statements? Most strongly supported. We're looking for what must be true based on the information that we just encountered in the passage. So, looking at answer choice A, particular acts of resident participation would be likely to elicit a positive response from local politicians if those politicians were less isolated from their electorate. Does that have to be true? And you notice it does not. It doesn't tell us that they would be likely to elicit a positive response if they were less isolated. All we know is that because politicians are isolated, this reduces the chance that their participation will elicit a positive response, and this discourages resident participation. Nothing about whether it would be likely to elicit a positive response if they were less isolated, so A is not supported and A would be eliminated. B, local political business should be conducted less secretively because this would avoid discouraging resident participation in local politics. And again, this does not follow. We know that there's two factors, local political business being secretive, but also the news media that tends to isolate politicians, which in turn lowers the chance that a particular act of resident participation will elicit a positive response, and this results in discouraging resident participation. But just having local political business conducted less secretively would not avoid discouraging resident participation in local politics because we still have this problem of the news media's poor coverage, so B does not follow, and B would be eliminated. C, the most important factor influencing a resident's decision as to whether to participate in local politics is the chance that the participation will elicit a positive official response. Well, we know it's clearly a factor because when it reduces the chance that it will have a positive response, this discourages their participation. But for us to say it's the most important factor, that is not supported by the information in the passage, so C would be eliminated. Moving to D, more frequent thorough coverage of local politics would reduce at least one source of discouragement from resident participation in local politics. And you notice that must be true. If we had better coverage of the news media, up here at the top, one of our two factors ultimately leading to the discouragement of resident participation, well, then it would be true that it would reduce at least one source of discouragement. So D must be true, and D would be the correct answer. Because again, at least one source. You notice that was the problem with B. B ignored that we had two factors. And then just making sure E, if resident participation in local politics were not discouraged, this would cause local politicians to be less isolated from their electorate. And you notice E just like a same type of problem, we have no information that says that just because we had resident participation not be discouraged, this does not mean that local politicians will be less isolated from their electorate. The problem that's causing politicians to be isolated is the poor news media coverage and the local political business being secretive, not this idea of local politics being discouraged. That's another effect from these two factors. So E is out.